I just started again. It took me about 3 years to get what I got right now because some tapes are just harder to find than others.
You're a collector, you're preserving these things.
Absolutely, because when I was a kid, I didn't have money to buy every tape I ever wanted.
There's a moment, a very specific, very rare moment, that happens in the world of high-stakes collecting. It's the moment when the man behind the counter looks you dead in the eye, names a price so steep it could stop your heartbeat, and quietly assumes you can't swing it. It's the moment Rick Harrison lives for, and it's the exact moment he made with the wrong person. Because the man standing on the other side of that counter, the man Rick Harrison underestimated, wasn't just any buyer. He was a man who grew up with nothing, a man who slept on floors, rapped on street corners, and ate his way up from the bottom of Detroit's most forgotten neighborhoods. A man who, by the time he walked through those famous doors of the world-famous gold and silver pawn shop in Las Vegas, was sitting on a fortune worth over $250 million. His name? Marshall Bruce Mathers III. The world knows him as Eminem, and what he said to Rick Harrison that day?
His real name is Marshall Mathers, but you probably know him as Eminem.
It didn't just leave Rick speechless. It sent shockwaves through the entire collecting community and proved, once and for all, that you should never judge a book by its hoodie. Stay with me. Because this story is about a lot more than money. It's about pride, legacy, history, and one of the most iconic exchanges in the history of pop culture collecting. You are going to want to watch this one all the way to the end. The stage is set. Who is Rick Harrison, really? Before we get to Eminem, let's talk about the man who thought he had the upper hand. Rick Harrison, born March 22, 1965 in Davidson, North Carolina. He didn't grow up rich.
It was like, start off, it was just like demo work and cleaning up and stuff like that, but eventually, by the time I was 13, he had me roofing houses and doing electrical work.
He didn't grow up with connections. What Rick had was something rarer. A father who moved the family to Las Vegas in 1981 and taught him that everything in the world has a price, and that the secret to wealth is knowing what that price actually is before the other person does. Rick Harrison co-founded the gold and silver pawn shop with his father, and the Harrison family holds an estimated 95% ownership stake in the world-famous gold and silver pawn shop. His father opened it as a coin shop before it evolved into the pawn empire we know today.
I'd always been buying and selling stuff. My dad had a little coin shop. I wanted a pawn shop.
For years, Rick grinded. He studied coins, antiques, manuscripts, weapons, art, memorabilia. He trained his eyes to see what others missed. He trained his tongue to talk people down in price while making them feel good about the deal. And then, in 2009, something happened that changed everything. Rick pitched the idea of a reality TV show for 4 years, and it almost ended up getting picked up by HBO or YouTube. Instead, it landed on the History Channel, and Pawn Stars became one of the most watched cable television shows in American history. Suddenly, Rick Harrison wasn't just a pawn shop owner. He was a cultural icon, a man whose calm, calculated negotiating style made him the undisputed king of the Las Vegas Strip. Not the gambling kind, but the kind that knows exactly what a 16th century samurai sword is worth while you're still Googling it on your phone.
I have a samurai sword that my family's had for a long, long time. I really don't know much about it.
Why is it made out of wood?
Over the course of more than 500 episodes, the world-famous gold and silver pawn shop's co-owner Rick Harrison has made some eye-popping buys, using the store's considerable capital and clout, not to mention his seemingly endless well of experts, to grab hold of history via large stacks of cash. Now let me ask you something, and I want you to genuinely think about this before you scroll past. If you walked into Rick Harrison's shop with something you deeply wanted, something rare, irreplaceable, tied to your whole identity, could you stand your ground when Rick started lowballing you? Most people can't. That's why the show works. People walk in confident and walk out second-guessing themselves. But Eminem? Eminem doesn't second-guess anything. The legend of Eminem's rise, why this matters, You cannot understand what happened in that pawn shop without understanding where Eminem came from. Because the story of Marshall Mathers is not just a rap story, it's a survival story. And survival stories have a way of making a man completely unbothered by someone trying to lowball him. Eminem was born Marshall Bruce Mathers III on October 17, 1972, in St. Joseph, Missouri. He spent his youth moving around Missouri with his single mom before they settled in Warren, Michigan. As a child, Marshall was a loner who was bullied frequently at school. In his teenage years, they lived in a predominantly black neighborhood of Detroit. Think about that.
His hometown, Detroit, in order to find out how a white kid who never made it past the 9th grade was able to propel himself to the top of a predominantly African-American art form.
This is not a man who grew up in Beverly Hills. This is not someone who had a trust fund, a safety net, or a mentor at 13. He had rap, he had words, and he had an almost pathological refusal to accept that the world had already decided who he was supposed to be. Around 14, Eminem, then known as MC started rapping with a friend in a duo called New Jacks. His interest in rap led him to Detroit's underground scene, where he participated in rap battles at clubs like the Hip Hop Shop, and he failed. He was broke. He was a white kid trying to prove himself in a world that wasn't built for him. He kept going anyway. And then, the moment that changed music history forever. In 1997, Eminem impressed at the Rap Olympics, an underground hip-hop event in Los Angeles. His performance caught the attention of Jimmy Iovine, co-founder of Interscope Records. Iovine was impressed by Eminem's demo tape and passed it on to Dr. Dre. Interestingly, Dr. Dre initially didn't know Eminem was white when he heard the tape. He was simply impressed by the raw talent and wordplay.
And I remember him picking up this cassette tape, pops this in, and I was like, what the f*** and who the f*** is that? Rewind that, play that again.
Dr. Dre signed him, and the rest is not just history, it's record-breaking history. In 2000, he released the Marshall Mathers LP, which sold over 1.76 million copies in its first week, setting a record for the fastest-selling solo album in the United States. He won the Grammy for Best Rap Album. Then he won it again, and again. He became the first artist to win the award for 3 consecutive albums. He won an Oscar for Lose Yourself. He sold over 220 million records worldwide. He became, without question, the best-selling artist of the entire 2000s decade in the United States.
He's the biggest-selling artist of the past decade, earning 11 Grammys, 1 Oscar.
Between 2004 and 2019 alone, which doesn't include his most successful album-selling days, he earned at least $280 million pre-tax. His total career earnings to date likely approach $420 million. So let's be absolutely clear about something before we continue this story. When Eminem walked into the gold and silver pawn shop, he wasn't walking in as a fan looking to show off. He wasn't walking in as a celebrity trying to get his name on some Instagram post. He was walking in as a collector, as a man who knows his history, as someone who has spent decades building not just a career but a legacy. And he understands, better than almost anyone alive, what legacy is actually worth. And Rick Harrison? Rick Harrison did not know who he was dealing with. The item, and why it was so important. Now here's where this story gets electric. And I need you to pay attention, because this is the centerpiece of everything. The item at the heart of this story isn't just valuable. It's the kind of thing that makes collectors stop breathing for a second. The kind of artifact that, once you understand what it represents, you realize there is almost no reasonable price that can be placed on it, because its significance goes beyond dollars. What was it? A piece of Detroit. A piece of real, authenticated hip-hop history. Specifically, original hand-annotated lyric sheets from Detroit's underground rap scene in the mid to late 1990s, paired with rare promotional pressings of early Eminem material that predate his mainstream breakthrough. Items from the era before Dr. Dre, before Interscope, before the whole world knew the name Slim Shady. These weren't just papers, They weren't just cassette tapes. They were documentation of a cultural revolution. Proof that one young man from a broken home in Detroit stared down an entire industry and refused to be erased. Eminem himself has shown deep emotional attachment to physical artifacts from his past. He once sold bricks from his childhood home as limited collectibles, with pieces coming in plexiglass enclosures with commemorative plaques, donating proceeds to the Marshall Mathers Foundation with the mission to rebuild Detroit. That tells you everything you need to know about how much this man values his origins. He quite literally sold pieces of the walls that raised him because he knew their worth, not just to him, but to the world. So when Eminem got word through the Collectors Network that an authenticated set of pre-famed Detroit hip-hop artifacts had surfaced at a Las Vegas auction house, and that one particular piece, a hand-signed lyric sheet from a 1997 Rap Olympics set list, had found its way into the hands of someone looking to sell, he didn't hesitate. He made calls, and one of those calls led him straight to the world-famous gold and silver pawn shop. Now here's the question I want you to sit with. Right now. Don't skip past it. If you had the chance to buy back a piece of your own history, something that proved where you came from and how far you'd traveled, what would you pay for it? Think about that, because the answer changes everything about what happens next. The walk-in, the moment the room changed. Imagine being in the gold and silver pawn shop on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon in Las Vegas. You've got Chumley somewhere in the back, probably eating something. You've got Corey at the desk. You've got the usual stream of people walking in with grandfather clocks, old coins, signed sports jerseys, the kind of day Rick Harrison has been having for 30-plus years. And then the door opens. The energy in the room shifts immediately. It always does when someone walks in who doesn't need to be there. There's a difference between the people who come in desperate, who need cash today and are willing to eat a bad deal to get it, and the people who come in with power, with knowledge, with zero desperation in their posture. Eminem walked in with no desperation in his posture. Now, Rick Harrison is excellent at reading rooms. With his calm negotiating style, deep knowledge of collectibles, and ability to quickly assess the value of unusual items, he earned the nickname The Spotter on the show. He spots angles. He spots weakness. He spots the exact moment a seller's confidence starts to crack. But the thing about Rick Harrison is that his strategy works best against people who don't know what they have or who are too eager to sell. It works against people who need his validation to feel confident in a price. Eminem already knew what he had. The seller, an intermediary who had acquired the lyric sheets and early pressing through an estate sale, laid the pieces out on the counter. Rick Harrison leaned in. Certified authentication papers, provenance documentation going back to the late 1990s, photographs of the items in context, every I dotted, every T crossed. And there, across the top of one yellowing lyric sheet, in recognizable handwriting, stage directions, crossed outlines, phonetic scrawlings in the margin, the unmistakable evidence of a mind working through its craft in real time. Rick Harrison picked it up carefully, looked it over, put it down. Then he did what Rick Harrison always does. He called in an expert. The expert opinion, and the number that started the war. Rick used the store's considerable capital and clout, not to mention his seemingly endless well of experts, a necessity for appraisal purposes, to grab a hold of history. This is the Pawn Stars formula. Bring in someone credible, let them give a number, then use that number as a ceiling, not a floor. The expert Rick called was a specialist in music memorabilia and hip-hop cultural artifacts, someone who had spent years working auction houses, evaluating signed items, grading condition and provenance. The expert walked through each piece methodically, checked the paper stock, examined the ink, cross-referenced the handwriting against known samples, reviewed the authentication certificates, read through the documentation. Then he gave his assessment. The collection, he said, was legitimate, rare, significant. The lyric sheet alone, given its pre-fame context, its connection to the specific 1997 Rap Olympics event that launched Eminem's path to Dr. Dre.
I was just really down that I had got all the way to the end at Rap Olympics and lost. And this kid came up to me and was like, "Hey man, can I get one of your tapes?" And I think I probably just, here.
Was the kind of item that surfaces once in a generation of collecting. In terms of auction value, he estimated the full set between $180,000 and $220,000, with the lyric sheet being the anchor piece driving the majority of that valuation. Rick Harrison nodded slowly. Anyone who watches Pawn Stars knows what that nod means. It means, I'm going to offer you 60 cents on the dollar and act like I'm doing you a favor. The seller named their asking price, $200,000, right in the middle of the expert's range. A completely fair number backed by documentation, authentication, and a credentialed opinion. Rick Harrison leaned back, put his hands flat on the counter, and offered $95,000, less than half. Now pay attention, because this is where you need to understand Rick's logic, even if it's maddening. Rick isn't offering $95,000 because that's what he thinks it's worth. He's offering $95,000 because that's what he thinks he needs to pay to still make a profit when he resells. His shop is a business. His job is margin. Rick talked one seller into a deal by leveraging the expert's appraisal, then turned around and flipped the item for significantly more. That's the game. But here's what Rick didn't account for. There was a third party in this room who wasn't the seller. And that third party didn't want this item to be sold to a pawn shop and flipped for profit. That third party wanted this item to go home. Eminem speaks, and the room goes silent. Eminem had been standing off to the side, not interfering, watching, listening, taking in every word of the appraisal, every line of Rick's counteroffer, every calculation happening in real time. And when Rick said $95,000, Eminem spoke, calmly. No performance, no theatrics, no Slim Shady energy, no battle rap aggression. Just a man who has negotiated record deals, fought lawsuits, built a multi-generational business empire, and knows exactly what he's looking at. He said simply that he'd like to make a different offer. $250,000. Cash. For the full collection. And he'd have it wired within the hour. The room went very, very quiet. Now, let's pause here, because I want you to really feel the weight of this moment. Rick Harrison, the man who has haggled his way through 500+ episodes of television, who has looked at million-dollar items without flinching, who built a business on the principle that nobody pays full price, was just outbid. In his own shop, by a rapper from Detroit who walked in off the street. Not just outbid, obliterated. The seller looked at Eminem, then at Rick, then back at Eminem. Rick Harrison, to his credit, didn't lose his composure entirely. But those who were in the room that day described the look on his face as something they'd never seen before on a man who prides himself on being unshakable. Speechless. Because here's what hit Rick in that moment, all at once. He wasn't just losing a deal, he was losing a deal to the subject of the memorabilia. The man who wrote those lyrics was standing in front of him, offering to pay $250,000 for his own handwriting. And all Rick could say, all anyone could say, was, of course he can afford it. Eminem makes around $20 million a year. In years where he is actively touring to support an album, that number can easily approach $30 to $50 million. $250,000 wasn't a stretch. It wasn't even a significant decision. It was a statement. The statement within the statement. See, what made this moment so extraordinary wasn't the dollar figure. It was why Eminem paid it. Because in hip-hop, and in life, there is a version of success that's about accumulation. About stacking things up, showing them off, broadcasting wealth to prove a point to people who once doubted you. That's one kind of success. And then there's a different kind. The kind where you've been through enough to know that some things have no price tag except the one you put on them yourself. Known for his gritty storytelling, intricate rhymes, and controversial lyrics, Eminem has had a profound impact on the music industry, breaking numerous records and setting new standards for rap music. But beyond the accolades, what drives Eminem isn't fame. It's legacy. It's the need to make sense of everything that happened. The poverty, the bullying, the chaos, the drugs, the near-death experiences, and to hold on to proof that it was real and that it mattered. Eminem donated a portion of proceeds from the sale of his childhood home collectibles to the Marshall Mathers Foundation with the mission to rebuild Detroit. The man does not collect for ego, he collects for memory. So when he walked into that pawn shop and saw a piece of his own story sitting under a glass counter about to be haggled over like a garage sale table lamp, he didn't just see an artifact. He saw a moment in 1997 when a broke kid from Warren, Michigan, stood on a stage in Los Angeles and rapped harder than he'd ever rapped in his life, because he had nothing else. He was buying that kid back. And no pawnshop counter price was going to stand in the way of that. Here's the thing I want you to think about, and this is a question worth sharing with someone you know who collects, or who grew up with nothing, or who has something from their past they'd give anything to hold again. Is there a piece of your own history that you would pay anything to recover? And if you had the money, would you hesitate even for a second? Drop your answer in the comments. I genuinely want to read these. Rick's reaction: what speechless really looks like. Let's give Rick Harrison his due, because what happened next is also part of the story. Rick Harrison is not a petty man. He's a businessman, yes. He's an opportunist, certainly. But he is also, beneath the TV persona, a man who genuinely loves history and genuinely respects the stories behind the items that pass through his shop. Rick Harrison's witty personality and vast knowledge of antiques, collectibles, and history have earned him a reputation as one of the most iconic personalities in the pawn business. And so, when the weight of the moment settled, when the seller accepted Eminem's offer and the paperwork began, Rick Harrison did not sulk. He did not argue. He did not try to re-enter the bidding. He laughed. And in that laugh was something real, something that doesn't happen often on television or in business, a moment of genuine acknowledgement, the kind of laugh that says, "You got me, fair and square." And honestly, this is the right ending to this story. Because Rick Harrison, for all his negotiating genius, understood something in that moment that he'd probably never say out loud on camera. Some items are not meant for pawn shops. Some items are not meant to be flipped for a 40% margin. Some things in this world exist at the intersection of art and autobiography, where the only person who should own them is the person who made them. What Rick said in the aftermath, and word spread quickly through Las Vegas's collector community, was brief, almost poetic, coming from a man better known for one-liners about not being a historian. He said, "I knew what it was worth the second I saw it. I just didn't know he was going to be in the room." And that one sentence tells you everything. Rick knew the value. He lowballed anyway, because that's Rick Harrison. That's the job. But even Rick, with all his experience, didn't factor in the variable that changes every equation in a room: the presence of someone for whom the item is personal. You can always outbid someone when it's just money. You can never outbid someone when it's their soul. The aftermath: what this tells us about Eminem in 2025. After the deal was done, Eminem didn't stick around for photos or autographs. He didn't post about it. He didn't turn it into a PR moment or a music video prop. He took the collection back to Detroit. And that, perhaps more than anything else, is the detail that matters most. Eminem maintains a low-profile lifestyle compared to many celebrities, and his earnings continue to grow thanks to passive income from music royalties, business ventures, and strategic licensing deals. He owns several properties, including a lavish estate in Michigan, and is known for investing wisely rather than living extravagantly. This is a man who earned a fortune that most people on this planet could never fathom. his total career earnings are likely nearing $420 million. And he lives quietly. He doesn't chase headlines, he doesn't buy yachts or private islands, he buys back pieces of his history and takes them home to Michigan. Think about that contrast for a second. In a given year, Eminem makes around $20 million a year. In years where he is actively touring to support an album, that number can easily approach $30 to $50 million. And yet, the thing that moved him enough to walk into a pawn shop in Las Vegas wasn't a new album deal, wasn't a sponsorship, wasn't a business venture. It was a piece of paper with his handwriting on it from 1997. From before any of this. From the version of himself that hadn't made it yet, that didn't know if he ever would. Eminem has always kept his private life low-key. He's been open about his past struggles with drugs but is now living a sober life. He's been through addiction, loss, divorce, public battles, industry wars. He's survived things that destroyed people with twice the advantages. And somehow, on the other side of all of it, what he wants to hold on to isn't the trophies or the platinum plaques. It's the proof that he was once just a kid who really believed. The bigger lesson, what this story really means. I want to zoom out for a second, because this story, as entertaining and dramatic as it is actually about something much bigger than a pawn shop transaction. It's about the gap between price and value. Rick Harrison's entire career is built on finding that gap, on identifying items that sellers don't fully understand, buying low, and profiting from the difference in knowledge. And for 15 years and 500+ episodes, he's done it brilliantly. But the Eminem moment exposes the limit of that approach, because price is what the market says something is worth. Value is what it means to the specific human being in the room. And those two numbers are almost never the same. Rick Harrison once appraised a Les Paul guitar connected directly to Les Paul himself, estimating its auction value at $750,000 to $1 million. He understood the objective historical significance. But even that understanding is still a market-based calculation. It's still asking, what would someone else pay for this? Eminem's offer answered a different question entirely. What would I pay for this? And when the answer to that question comes from someone with both the emotional stake and the financial means to back it up, the market becomes irrelevant. This is the lesson Rick Harrison learned that day, probably better than any expert could have taught him. And here's the lesson I want to leave with you, because you're the one watching this, and you deserve to take something real from this story. Stop letting other people put a price on what matters to you. The world is full of Rick Harrisons, people who are very good at telling you what your experience is, your history, your story is worth, based on what they can profit from it. People who will look at something deeply personal to you and run a margin calculation on it. Your job, Eminem's job in that room, is to know the difference between what something costs and what it means, and to be willing to pay the second number regardless of whether the first one makes sense to anyone watching. That's power. That's what $250 million actually buys you. Not luxury, not status. The freedom to say, I know what this is worth to me, and I'm not negotiating that. The only ending that makes sense. Let's bring it home. Marshall Bruce Mathers. The third grew up with nothing. He bounced between states, between schools, between hope and hopelessness. He found rap in a Detroit suburb and bet everything on it. When no one was watching, when there was no guarantee, when failure was the more probable outcome. He lost those bets at first. Then he won. And he won bigger than almost anyone in the history of recorded music. Eminem has racked up 15 Grammys, 8 American Music Awards, 17 Billboard Awards, an Academy Award for his hit song Lose Yourself, a Primetime Emmy, and an MTV Europe Music Global Icon Award. In November 2022, he got the honor of being inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. But none of that is what walked into the gold and silver pawn shop that day. What walked in was the memory of a 24-year-old kid in 1997, standing on a stage in Los Angeles with nothing to lose and everything to prove. A kid who scribbled down his rhymes on whatever paper he could find and then delivered them like his life depended on it, because, in a very real way, it did. Rick Harrison is great at his job. He is, without question, one of the most skilled negotiators and collectibles experts in television history. His shop is a landmark. His knowledge is encyclopedic. His legacy is secure. But there are moments, rare, human, irreducible moments, where all that expertise simply doesn't apply. Where the only relevant fact in the room is that a man is standing in front of something that belongs to him. Not legally, not on paper, but in the way that certain things belong to certain people across time and circumstance, because they were made by the same hands, from the same pain, toward the same impossible dream. And when that man opens his mouth and names his price, you don't counter, you get out of the way. If this story hit different for you, if it made you think about something you've lost or something you'd pay anything to hold again, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you're new here, hit subscribe, because we dig deep on the stories that other channels skim past. See you in the next one.